My name is Robert Diamanti, and I'm very happy to introduce tonight's program, What Would You Read? Inaugural Poems, hosted by Megan Sterling. Littorally Live is brought to you by Littoral Books, Maine's independent publisher of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction books based in Portland, Maine. Visit the website to purchase titles such as Agnes Buchel's The Oracle Pool, Mast Year by Catherine Hagopian Berry, Enough, Poems of Resistance and Protest, A Dangerous New World, and Balancing Act 2. First, I want to remind everybody that tonight's event will be recorded. Oops, sorry, I have to let a couple people in, my apologies. It will be recorded and shared on the Littoral Books website. Incidentally, all the previous recordings are now live on the Littorally Alive page. If you are joining us as a guest, please turn off your audio and your video and help us preserve bandwidth. You will have the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the program. You may also type in your thoughts, comments, and questions as each of our talented poets reads. In fact, we encourage that. There are reaction buttons on the bottom of your screen. You may also control the number of readers you see on the screen at any given time by toggling your view, which is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. In keeping with our theme of What Would You Do, February 17th, Littorally Alive will go back to its Wednesday night programming and host a salon called Where Would You Go? Artists and writers discuss their relationships to travel with Agnes Buchel, Judy Ellen Efstathio, Sharif El Musa, and Gary Lawless, who is with us tonight. More information will be posted on our website. Sign up for our e-news to stay in touch. And before we go on, I want to acknowledge Amanda Gorman, who will read The Hill We Climb, the youngest inaugural poet ever. Megan, what do you think of that?
I'm so happy.
Thrilled.
I'm so happy poetry is back in the inauguration.
Agreed. I will be hiding behind the logo and enjoy yourselves.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome. This is a momentous occasion. I have a candle here lit in honor of what Biden and Harris are doing tonight to honor so many people that died over this past year. This inauguration is a lot more weighty than we had originally thought it would be when we started planning this back in, well, 3 weeks ago. The events of October 6th have really changed the feeling of what we're stepping into. We were hoping to welcome President Biden and Vice President Harris with jubilance, our hearts open and eager to embrace this change. But I feel that we feel more serious. It's taken on a more somber tone. I think a lot of us are afraid to hope too big. But tonight, we're gathering together to read poems to join our voices in that hope and celebrate this much needed change. I know I'm not alone in hoping for the safety for everyone involved in the proceedings that are going to happen tomorrow, and hoping for healing in the months and years that are to follow. That this new administration takes real, meaningful steps to protect the lives of people of color, of the LGBTQ community, of women, of the arts, of all those who are committed to protecting each other's rights to exist in safety. We have here tonight 10 poets who are reading the poems that they would share had they been chosen as the inaugural poet for this momentous occasion. Please enjoy, use the comment boxes to share your thoughts and responses as we go along. And if you brought a poem to share, we would love to hear it at the end of this program. And with that, I'd like to welcome our first poet, Claire Milliken. Claire Milliken is the author of 7 books of poetry, including Ransom Street, 2019, and State Fair Animals, 2018, a finalist for the Maine Literary Award in Poetry. She lives in Owl's Head some of the time and teaches art history at various universities elsewhere. Welcome, Claire.
Okay, thank you so much, Megan, and thank you for organizing this reading. I'm going to read a poem for Kamala Harris, and there's a quote in the poem from the Algerian French feminist Hélène Cixous. So anyway, just so that you know, I don't want to plagiarize. The title of the poem is The Kitchen. The Kitchen. As the pandemic stays on, an unwanted guest, the kitchen at dusk sometimes seems like my grandmother's house. And I am a small child standing, hungry, unable to ask to be fed, but am given a chair where I watch the women, grandmother and aunt, prepare the meal. Unwanted, I have been in many places. No one wants a girl who stares that hard. No one wants a girl to be that smart, to step up and ask for what she wants. I think of you in your kitchen, Kamala Harris, this night before inauguration. And I remember reading how, as a child, you once baked cookies with salt, and they were loved anyway. A woman, one heart beat from the presidency. What would the language that women speak really be like if no one were there to correct us? On January 21st, 2021, we can begin to hear the words a woman speaks as if they matter. Will we give them weight? Will we give her a chair in the kitchen of our hungers, our skies, our doves and weathers? The night before inauguration, Kamala, I imagine you skilled in your own kitchen, cooking carefully, understanding what it is to need to survive. No one wants a woman to say what should be done, to boss them around. But what would be the language women would speak if no one were there to stop us? What will you speak, one heartbeat from the presidency, careful daughter, beloved of a mother who taught you to answer every sky and the evening theaters of hunger in this pandemic year? So that's my poem for Kamala. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Claire. What a magnificent poem. Just beautiful. If anyone has reactions, please add them to the chat box. And with that, we're going to move on to our next poet, Doug Rawlings. Doug Rawlings is a veteran of the American War in Vietnam. He is a co-founder of the international peace group, Veterans for Peace, and has lived in Maine for over 40 years. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Megan. I have three short poems that I'd like to read. This opening statement, in our righteous anger, in our need to act on behalf of ourselves and our loved ones as the new year unfolds, we should also take a moment to find peace within ourselves, and then to continue our work building our beloved communities to carry us through the years ahead. So here are three poems addressing these concerns. First is entitled Homage to the Winter Moon. Advice for all of us, I hope. Homage to the winter moon. Apple trees stripped of their summer fruit, squat like ancient mothers fingering the intricate lacework of their own moon shadows. And we, slipping into their solemn world, feel the evening's strident headlines grow silent as the peace of this place, of this moment, sifts down into us, drifts into its own elaborate design, builds deep within us its own magical pillars to carry us through the days ahead. Second poem is entitled PTSD Remedies. I resurrect it after hearing about what the folks went through on January 6th in the Capitol, and knowing, some of them probably for the first time in their lives, what it feels like to know that someone is literally trying to kill you or to do you great harm. And after the situation is over with, it just doesn't go away. So this is PTSD remedies, thinking of those folks. First off, drop the P. There's nothing post about a mirror that threatens to slit your wrist. But keep the D. I'll take disorder, sweet chaos, anytime over this close order drill that haunts my early morning hours. Then let the healing begin. 1, ask yourself, who am I? 2, ask your lover, who are you? 3, remain still. Wait for he or she to whisper, who are we? Now the ache has permission to leave, and the sunrise can ease you into another day. Finally, a poem I wrote for my son when he was turning 13. It's odd that, we are one of these cultures that for whatever reason, we do not have a ritual saying to young boys, or young girls actually, you're now a man or you're now a woman, right? And for boys, when I was growing up, unfortunately, the ritual was to join the military. Now you're a man, that kind of deal. So as my son turned 13, I wrote him this poem. And I think it applies to young people today, I hope. To Josh turning 13. If non-vets were ancient shamans, now would be the moment we choose to give you shelter from the coming storm. But we are merely survivors of suburbs and cities, not forest nor mountain. Modern men offering you our silences, our words to guide you going out on your own. Yet we have known for years now that the silences of our fathers will not do. And we have known that words alone cannot bleed you free of your raging doubts. So listen up to what we have found between silences and words. Open up your fists. Scorn uniforms. Don't march. Dance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug, for those wonderful poems. It's funny, my husband often talks about how much a ritual of coming of age is lacking in American culture. I know that I was bat mitzvahed and it really changed me. It was like, it really was a threshold that I stepped over. It was like pre-bat mitzvah and post, because something grew. Because I think those rituals are really meaningful. Thank you. For our next poet, we have Gary Lawless. Gary Lawless is co-owner of Gulf of Maine Books in Brunswick, Maine. He has published 19 collections of poems in the US and 5 in Italy. Welcome, Gary.
Thanks. It's an honor to follow Doug on this inaugural eve, to follow a founder of Veterans for Peace. And who knows more about the need for peace than the veteran? I'm going to read one short poem by another veteran, by my friend and mentor, the wandering poet Nanao Sakaki. And Nanao was the radar man for a kamikaze squadron in the Second World War, and saw such horror at the end of the war that he basically dropped out of the 20th century and spent the rest of his life wandering the planet and writing poems and generally having a good time. I'm really pleased that Doug ended with that last piece for his son, because the last lines of that poem resonate with the last lines of this poem, and you'll see. So, Nanao Sakaki. If you have time to chatter, read books. If you have time to read, walk into mountain, desert, ocean. If you have time to walk, sing songs and dance. If you have time to dance, sit quietly, you happy, lucky idiots. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you so much, Gary. It was wonderful. For our next poet, we have Jefferson Nowicki. Jefferson Nowicki is the author of the story collection, The Paper Coast, and the poetic novel, The Book of Transparencies. He is the archivist for the Maine Women Writers Collection and teaches English at Southern Maine Community College. Welcome, Jefferson.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be here tonight with so many wonderful poets and friends. And a real treat to be following Gary Lawless too. So, it was, the question of what to read, what would you read as the inaugural poet? For a moment, I thought that seems so easy, like just read one poem, and then you start to think about it, and it's not easy at all. This is like a very difficult question, and I started to think like what would the qualities be you would want to stir in a poem like this? And I actually asked my parents on FaceTime, and they said inspiration, something inspiring. And I thought of maybe something like community or some kind of inclusiveness or something like that. Maybe even patriotism, which is kind of a weird word in some ways, but that it came into my head. And all these things I don't feel very often in my everyday life, except for I realize that I feel that way about poetry. And particularly how I've kind of come in contact with spontaneous poems. It made me think of a poem that I had written since the pandemic, and poems, instead of as opposed to poetry with a capital P, the grand art form that those of us who go to poetry readings maybe we appreciate or can see some of the beauty in, but lots of other people don't see that kind of same feeling for poetry. A lot of raised eyebrows about poetry, kind of feelings of being left out or missing something, or which a lot of these people I teach, and some people are kind of like various levels of resentment, and some even people say that they hate poetry, like kind of relish saying that they hate poetry. But I've never seen any of those people who so vehemently hate poetry when given like one poem that really speaks to them and really gets into their heart, that then, oh boy, the world starts to change. So this is a poem, it's called One Poem. Please note, my dog might also bark. Please note, poems will save the world. Not so much poetry, but poems carried in pockets, posted to Facebook, read at rallies, stuck to refrigerators, read at retirement parties as gifts from the universe, the small needful facts that sustain us at protests and on the radio while pulling into the grocery store after a long day of work. One poem at a time, one poem to be sipped like a cup of tea for our sitting together, one piece of cake after dinner, one glass of wine, even if it's 2 glasses of wine, because one poem stretches out into an evening of conversation beneath a string of lights in the backyard. Friends and family at the picnic table and children running through the dark, laughing, poems sparkling in their hands, a few moments of wondrous light. Thank you.
That was so beautiful. Thank you so much, Jefferson. Our next poet is Judy Caber. Judy Caber has lived in Maine since 1971 and taught elementary school here for 34 years. She is particularly interested in the sound and taste of language and the power that it has to move people. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm very excited to be able to read. I have just a short poem that I'm going to read, and basically it's for all those people who have felt weighted down by a succession of very gray and discouraging days that seem to have become very much a part of our lives. And now with the inauguration, I think we're feeling a changing of the guard and hopefully a changing of our lives. So this is a villanelle. It's called In Wonder. Because the world has given me this day a red-rubbed crown of light, a spray of snow, I stand in awe. I push away the gray and praise the earth. My old work shirt is frayed, the cuffs are torn, my knuckles thick with dough and age. The world has given me this day and I clutch it in my fist. The bay, awash with slick-back waves, a rough-edged glow, I stand in awe. I push away the gray despair that's held so tight to my airway I couldn't breathe. Outside, mouse tracks in snow. I know the world has given me this day to celebrate, to craft my art, to lay a string of beauty in my wake. And so I stand in awe and push away the gray. Sometimes I'm mute, since all I have to say won't fit inside a poem. I'm old and know I'll die, and yet the world gave me this day. I stand in awe and praise it in my way. Thank you.
Judy, that was lovely. Thank you so much. Our next poet is Catherine Hagopian Berry. Catherine Hagopian Berry has appeared in the Cafe Review, Deepwater, Poems from Here, and Glass, Poets Resist, among other places. Her first full collection, Masked Year, is available from Littoral Books. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you, Megan. Good, the volume works. Like Claire, I strangely found my way into this poem by imagining myself into another poet's world, into another person's world. For Claire, that was Kamala Harris, and for me, my poem found shape. I fell into this thing where I really wanted to do it. I really wanted to write a poem specifically for the inauguration, and I couldn't. I failed miserably time and time again until I heard that Amanda Gorman was going to be the presidential inaugural poet. And for some reason, just picturing her and what she can do and how amazing she is opened the door to a poem for me. So this is an inauguration poem by way of a love letter to Amanda Gorman, I guess, called Inauguration. Write about hope, Joe Biden says to his presidential inaugural poet. So I imagine her, luminous genius, incandescent laptop, halo light. I am sure she has her own room in which to write. It has a ficus or possibly a fern and a view of the water. I have been trying for days to write about hope. Frozen at the wood stove, door open, all that held smoke exploding into cooling rooms, some black smolder of a log stubborn on its grate. Often, you cannot even tell it is burning until some vulnerable alchemy ignites down the whole charred body, orange flame. You think Phoenix, or even morning, or even my friends are writing about birds again. the rain has changed to snow. They have raised the first frail wall of my new office. It has a window. I can picture the water. In the pre-dawn silence, I go down to the basement to write, mist the cactus, check on fire. By some miracle, the stove still warms. Thank you.
Beautiful, Catherine. Thank you, thank you. Our next poet is Leonora Hildebrandt. Leonora Hildebrandt is the author of the poetry collections Where You Happen to Be, The Work at Hand, and The Next Unknown. A native of Germany, Leonora lives off the grid in Harrington, Maine, and spends the winter in Silver City, New Mexico. Welcome, Leonora.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you all for being here. And thank you for the opportunity to write about the inauguration. I felt there needed to be an inclusive, grand gesture for that moment. And here's my attempt at that. This is called I Cannot Live Without You. Dear country, my new world, today is good. A bright and breezy morning that awakens every cell of your body. The birds and trees and meadows and clouds balance with the earth's movement. The people who have taken you for granted pause for a moment and regard you. As always, you are generous, welcoming them back. My dear country, today you celebrate. The past has left you wounded. You have come face to face with your fragility, the house of democracy broken into and vandalized, servants of the Constitution brazen, betraying the people. You have come through the tumult in the streets, the howling of sirens, hate words, Confederate flags. You have been cloistered, lonely, and sick. You mourn the losses. And so today, your vision of greatness returns to its roots, humility. You note that you are one of many who are gathered at the table. While you have not achieved all you set out to do, you had the audacity to dream of equality and justice. You are built on the wish for a more perfect union. My new world, you are beautiful, resilient. Already the hills swept by last year's fires are greening. As public spaces reopen, the life of communities will rebound. We will send our children to school, mingle in the city streets, gather at potlucks, coffee shops, and corner stores. We will kiss our grandkids, offer a hand, a heart, the compassionate touch we've been craving. We will agree on what the numbers tell us. Dear country, I cannot live without you. In fact, I need you more. And I no longer feel helpless when I reach out to you. As we look at one another with fresh eyes, may I be honest, I am still disappointed that you would allow a man into the White House who cares about himself above all. I'm still tense when I think of the gamers and breakers of things, their threats both open carry and concealed. But I long for you to heal, dear country. You deserve applause, street dancers, a rainbow, a bouquet of roses. You deserve decency and know-how. Today, I see the linking of arms, an elastic chain to guard the transfer of power. I see you waving to your global neighbors, rejoining their efforts to keep the earth livable, to stand up to demagogues. Because the eagle, which you so proudly display in your emblems, cannot live by itself. It needs mountains and valleys and plains where other creatures too may thrive. It needs a spring, a weeping cloud, a stream. It needs a tree to rest on, the air to soar into. Today, you recall the story of the 13 colonies that formed a new single nation. They adopted a motto written on the scroll clenched in the eagle's beak. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. It was the Roman scholar Cicero who said it first. The webs of family, friendship, and community give rise to society and the state. He said, when each person loves the other as much as himself, it makes one out of many. Dear New World, you have restored the missing pronouns, herself, themselves. You know that one is made of many, and one is among many, and one depends on many. Ancient Rome believed in natural signs as clues when planning for the country's future. An augur observed the behavior of birds to see whether the gods favored a proposed action. So I try it myself. Watch the eagles come back in the windswept woods by the bay. I watch the pinion jays, noisy flocks of dry shrublands. They are pecking at cones, gathering, caching seeds that will sprout and grow. Birds. During migration, a shimmering river of wings flows through the darkness of night. The Roman augurs must have learned much about the ambitions of small bodies. Today's celebration is as momentous as a migration. Dear country, you may be tired, and yet your workers keep showing up. Your mothers are struggling harder than ever for the common good. Your doctors and nurses and caretakers keep mustering strength. The helpers at food pantries, the activists for a living earth, the protesters for Black lives, all offer visions of kinship. Taught by history, your people are dogged in their hope. For this has not been the last pandemic, the last struggle for racial equality, the last attempt by partisans to lead you astray. But today, you are breathing the sweet air. Inauguration, a rite of passage, a tribute to the bond between you, my dear country, and the people gathered here and elsewhere under the arc of sky. Today, when we listen to the birds, we say, how brave they are. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. Our sustenance, our learning, out of many. Each seed, the confluence of many.
Leonora, that was outstanding. Thank you so much for taking us on that journey with you. It was very inspiring. Thank you. Our next poet this evening is Leslie Moore. Leslie Moore is a poet and printmaker who lives in Belfast. Most of her subjects are animals. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you, Megan. My poem follows well after Leonora's because it is an observation of birds. Harbingers, Election Day, November 3rd, 2020. Lit like a candelabra in bare maple boughs, a flock of evening grosbeaks visits our feeder, splinter yellow against a gray November sky. Each bird waits its turn as we await tallies. Each descends to feast on black sunflower seeds, jostles for purchase, flutters others away, till a gust of hope spins our rare guests aloft to wheel and bank south towards Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. These are wonderful. Our next poet is Martin Steingesser. Martin Steingesser is a retired stilt dancer looking for high kicks in poems. His most recent word dance is Yellow Horses. Welcome, Martin. Martin, you're muted.
How could I forget? Thank you. Thank and all of you for the ground you've tilled. I'm very grateful. It's been a pleasure discovering what you're choosing to do and listening to you. I've decided to do a very few lines from a magnificent poem you will recognize, and the poet. If not, I would tell you. And then I'm going to follow it with a short poem by a poet named Jonathan Cohn, who, without further introductions. I celebrate myself and what I assume you shall assume for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. Whitman, Song of Myself, and he had such an incredible vision of our country. Actually, the first great vision of our country, maybe, that was articulated by anybody and can be well thought of as the father of American poetry. In the second verse of Song of Myself, he says, "Stop this day and night with me, and you will have the origin of all poems. You will no longer take things from second and third hand. You will not look through the eyes of the dead or feed off computers." No, he didn't say computers. He said books. But in the very next line, he said, "Nor will you look through my eyes either." Walt Whitman has come to visit me here in Portland, Maine. I look at the beard of my old friend and teacher, like a gray spiderweb of rain. I look at his boots covered with American mud. In two rocking chairs, we sit out on the back porch, exchanging words. Wherever he looks, the shoot of a poem grows. Where is your cosmos? I ask him. Where is the Western world, one and inseparable? The democracy, the eternal progress. Rain drips from his eyelids into the constellation of his beard. His shoulders bend under the invisible weight. That's up to you, he says calmly. I'm expecting the main things from you.
Thank you so much, Martin. That was wonderful. It's funny, Kate and I were just saying we're both thinking about Walt Whitman today as well. So it seems like there's something in the water here. I'm going to be the last official reader. And for those of you that have joined us, if you have a poem that you'd like to share, we do have some time before the end for you to share that poem. But before we do, we have a few bits of business. But first, I'm going to read a poem. I'm going to read a poem by a poet that I admire very much. Their name is Dana Smith. They are a Black queer poet who writes just tremendously powerful poems. And so I thought I'd share this very short poem by a very talented poet, Dana Smith. It's called Little Prayer. Little Prayer. Let ruin end here. Let him find honey where there was once a slaughter. Let him enter a lion's cage and find a field of lilacs. Let this be the healing, and if not, let it be. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic back to Robert Diamante.
Just like that. How am I supposed to follow up with any of this? This is amazing. What an amazing show tonight. Does anybody from our audience have something to share? Would they like to share a poem? Please unmute yourself, raise your hand, anything of the sort. No takers? Any questions for any of our poets? Do our poets have questions for one of their fellow poets?
I have a poem.
Who is that?
Carl Little.
Carl, right on. Go for it.
Okay. This is
Carl, tell us where you're from, please. Before
I'm zooming in from Soamesville.
right in, right on.
on Mount Desert Island. So this is called The Twain. A woman of a certain age notates the Apocrypha on the mailboat, seated on a blue and white cooler, wearing a mask, not to hide her identity. Late October afternoon, warm enough to go coatless, her glasses glinting. Studious amidst sounds of sea and engine, gulls and conversation of nearby carpenter who sports MAGA mask. He and coworkers talking about the hunting season ahead and what's left to finish on the fancy island house to which they commute 5 days a week. And never the twain shall meet? But they do, the man handing cooler over gunwale to the woman who seeks answers to some of the most profound mysteries. Apocryphal connection this fall day, with election only a week away, the mailboat equalizer, neutral convener, safe space. We're all in the same boat, the Sea Queen, making its way among the cranberries, microcosm of a cosmic universe where currents constantly shift, masks go on, come off, sun and moon take turns in the sky, islands hide in fog or stake out the horizon, and women and men of different stripes hand each other belongings in peace and quiet, all of us rocking back and forth on the water, waiting our turn to step off. Thank
Carl, that was wonderful. What an amazing portrait. Thank you so much for reading.
you bet. This is great.
Yeah, and please come back for more, share more. I have a
Sure.
feeling we're going to be doing a lot of this winter.
Cool.
Anybody else? Would anybody else like to read? Until somebody gets their courage, I'm going to announce our next program once more. Oh, I hear a voice.
Yes, and unfortunately, I can't start the video. It won't start.
I'll start it for you. Let me see.
Okay.
Who's this?
Now I'm allowed. Okay.
There you are.
Hi.
Daniel, where are you from? It looks like you're from a peninsula somewhere.
Well, I'm from Millbridge. The photo here hides my very messy office. So I didn't come prepared with anything overtly political, but this haiku that I wrote the other day may serve in a way. And in the tradition of haiku, I'll read it through twice. Wind-twisted birch sways in front of majestic spruce. Difference completes. Wind-twisted birch sways in front of majestic spruce. Difference completes. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And you know what's really exciting is that we have Harrington, we have Millbridge, we have Soamesville, we have Bangor. It's all over Maine. We're all over Maine, and it's just so wonderful to see all of these voices from everywhere. So, anybody else? Okay, until somebody gets up the courage, next program on February 17th will be Littorally Alive. We'll go back to its Wednesday night. We'll host a salon. Where would you go? Artists and writers discuss their relationship to travel. This is going to be really fun. And we're going to ask the public to share thoughts about travel. We're all sequestered. Many of us do travel a lot. And I think it's just going to be a really fun time to talk about travel with Agnes Buchel, Judy Allen Estacio, Sharif El Musa, and Gary Lawless. And then we'll post more information on our website, and definitely sign up for our e-news to stay in touch. And one more thing before somebody else volunteers to read, I'd love to know how you heard about Littorally Alive, how you have heard about it, whether you read about it in the newspaper or on a blog or somebody shared it with you. Send an email to info@littoralbooks.com. And just let us know what you think of the programs and perhaps what you'd like to see in the future. There's my video. Anybody else? Would anybody else like to read? Megan, what do you think? I'll close the program with a teeny tiny little bit of Walt Whitman, which is always my favorite poem to read to friends that are off doing something, or whenever I decide to leave a place with a little bit of drama. I always read The Untold Want, and I'll just read a couple lines from that. The untold want by life and land ne'er granted, now voyager, sail thou forth to seek and find. Great movie with Betty Davis too, by the way. Wonderful poem. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Would anybody else like to say some final words?
I do have one more poem here from Harrington. Brian Dyer Stewart.
Oh, there you are, Brian.
There I am. And I was...
Could you start your video if you don't mind?
Oh, sure.
If you really don't want to, that's fine.
It's a little dark, but here we are.
That's fine.
So this is a poem from today, thinking I was out on a little retreat. In the marsh, a spruce lies broken, pulled by gravity, erosion. Its bleached bones now short and spiked, beseeching the distant sea. Seaweed braided in layers around her knees, a long scar of gray clouds stretched to the horizon. A still life of winter, though further out, the tide is rising. Winter, the longest season, restrains her untried powers, the fury of her moonlight, the weary rage of her sun, the soft logic of snow, its beauty. That's it.
The soft logic of snow. That's really nice. Beautiful. All right. Anybody else? Final words? Would anybody else like to share where they're from? If not from Southern Maine, some tucked away hinterland?
I'm from Chester.
Anybody from out of state?
Originally, of course, but most of us were. I live in a town called Chesterville, which is tucked between the metropolis of Farmington and Augusta, about halfway in between.
I'm from Belfast.
I'm from Go ahead. I'm sorry. And I'm watching from another island, Manhattan.
Oh, thank you for coming. Wonderful. I feel that's a very exotic place. I'm from New Jersey, even more exotic.
I'm from LA, Los Angeles.
And I'm from Wilton, also in the not too far from Chesterville. And one thing I wanted to say was that when I was researching the woman who's going to be the actual inaugural poet, and when I first heard of her but hadn't seen her or heard her speak, I have to admit, and I'm very ashamed of myself, but I made some assumptions about her being so young and having some privileges, you know, having gone to Harvard, you know, knowing certain people with connections, and not feeling jealous, just knowing that she was in a different place. And it did cross my mind, 22, you know, so young, so new to life, you know. It will be interesting to know what someone of that age will have to say, and making all of these assumptions in my head, and then finding a video of her on YouTube or through something online. And you know, before I had seen her visually and heard the poetry, I was like, okay, you know, I wasn't, you know, moved one way or the other. but then to actually hear and see her, I was just blown away, just in love, like Catherine said. And I thought, this just confirms everything that I already feel, and we all know that, that poetry really is a spoken art. It's not really a written one. It's an oral experience. And I think that that's part of why, even on Zoom, these nights that we have are so moving. And I think that if people had the experience of poetry as something that they heard rather than were made to read, there wouldn't be so many people that had that negative, I don't like poetry. Poetry's not for me, feeling, if the first thing that they had was an oral experience and not just a words on the page one. Because my experience of this poet we'll hear tomorrow night, was turned into something, glorious by experiencing the words coming out of her and experiencing her with all my senses instead of just reading something on the page. I just wanted to add that, and I wish we could all, think of all the poets all over the country who have written and shared with each other. So I just thought I would add that.
Nancy, thank you. I want to read Catherine's reaction. Isn't it funny? I heard 22, and that was like a breath of hope. Finally felt like something new was starting. I'm going to challenge everybody to bring somebody who doesn't like poetry to the next Littorally Alive poetry reading. How about that?
That will be that's in March, isn't it?
We're going to do a green poetry reading in March.
Eco poetry.
On St. Paddy's Day, obviously eco poetry. And we've invited back Marika Vandersteenhoven, who you all might remember from the early days of Littorally Alive. She'll be reading Jackie Moore's poems from Chasing the Grass in between other poets who will be reading From a Dangerous New World, etc. So Nancy, thank you for your comments, actually. Those were beautiful. And
Robert, I would just like to say before I have to leave, thank you all who've come and been here in addition to the readers. And it's such a treat to, in all of the sequestering a lot of us do, to see the faces of friends who I don't get to see and haven't seen, and to be able to be here together with you and to see some new friends and new faces, and how some of you who I do know, and I'm so glad to see, how I begin to feel like a community, a new community with you in these little boxes. So thanks for being here, and wish for all of us to have a good day, and for those in Washington to be safe, and for it to go really beautifully. So, and I have to leave. So thanks everybody.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Well put, Martin. Well put.
Thank you everyone for being here, and come join us again next month, and we'll stay in touch. Happy inauguration, everyone.
Thank you all.